Alright, today we're going to talk about our third form that quadratic equations can take. So far we've learned about standard form and the method of graphing if it's in standard form. Then yesterday we learned about vertex form and how in vertex form we find our vertex first and then a mirror point across. Today we're going to learn our last form, which is called intercept form. Yesterday vertex form had one set of parentheses that had a squared on them. Today, in intercept form, we're going to have two sets of parentheses with no squareds on them. Okay? We still have our a value. In all three forms, we still have that a value, and it always means the same thing. It always tells us about whether or not our function is facing up or down, and how wide or narrow it is. So that a value can be a good indicator of our final answer, making sure our graph is facing the right way and is an appropriate width. The intercept form is going to give us 2 points right away that are going to be our intercepts on our x-axis. And those points are going to be the opposites of the numbers in the parentheses. So when we look at those parentheses, we're going to take the opposites of the numbers in them. Just like yesterday, we take the opposite of the number in the parentheses. We take the opposites of those numbers, and those are going to be our intercepts, or our points on our x-axis. And then our last thing we're going to do is find our vertex, which by symmetry should be halfway between them. So our first step is to find our x-intercepts. Another word for x-intercepts is zeros or roots. Those are all synonyms. Zeros, roots, and x-intercepts all mean the same thing. And they're going to be the opposites of the numbers in the parentheses. So our zeros or x-intercepts are going to be 3 and -1. And those are both x values. Those are both points that are going to go on our x-axis. That's not like a point. Those are both points that are going to go on our x-axis. Then, I'm going to go ahead and just make a little graph somewhere so I can plot this out. So on my x-axis, I'm going to have a point at 3 and a point at -1. Because those points exactly match each other, the vertex should be right in the middle of them because we have this nice symmetry. So what we want to do is figure out what is the x value that is exactly in the middle of 3 and -1. In math, when we talk about a middle, what's a word that we use?
Median.
Median or?
Mode. No. Range. No.
A lot of teachers say it, like when they pass back the tests. You guys asked what the average was? Okay, so what we're going to do is take the average of those two values, and that'll tell us what's right in the middle of them. So if I take an average, how do I do that?
You can
Add them up, and I would divide by 2 because there's 2 of them. So 3 plus -1, and divide that by 2 gives 1. So right in the middle of those is 1. And that's where our line of symmetry should be. If I fold on that line, then those two matching points should land on top of each other. So my vertex is somewhere along that line, and now I just need to know where on that line it is. And I find that by taking the 1 and plugging it into the equation. So 2 times 1 minus 3 times 1 plus 1. There's 2 times -2 times +2, which is -8.
Where'd you put the 1 into?
Into the equation, the original y equals equation for x. And so my vertex is down at -8, and I can connect my dots.
Do you have to do stuff too? Like, do you have to solve it and everything? Or can you just find it?
Sometimes you can just eyeball it and see where the middle is. Some of them are not going to be whole numbers.
Okay.
And then so that'll be harder to just kind of eyeball and figure out that it's at whatever and a half or something like that. But sometimes you can just kind of eyeball and see where the middle is, or kind of count across and see that they're 4 apart from each other, so 2 apart must be the middle. But sometimes if it's going to end up in fractions, it might be easier to think about an average.
Where do you get the on the right side of the y equals equation?
Mm-hmm.
What is that from?
It's our original y equals equation with 1 plugged in. Since 1 is that symmetry value, we plug 1 into the original equation, and that gives us our y value, or the height of that vertex. So the height of the vertex was at -8.
It's like the next step of the side on the left.
Like, I mean, the 2 times -2.
Oh, I just did 1 minus 3 is -2.
Oh, okay.
So that was just the arithmetic working it out. Alright, so our first step is to find our zeros, our x-intercepts. And what are those going to be?
-2 and 4.
-2 and +4. Those are both x values. They both go on the x-axis. Then our next step is to find out what is exactly in the middle of those. So you could maybe eyeball it or just kind of count across, or you can take an average. -2 plus 4 divided by 2 gives 1. It's a coincidence that we got 1 in both of these. It's not always 1, so don't just start always answering that it's 1. Then we're going to take that and plug it into our equation, and that'll tell us how high or low to plot the vertex on that line. So I get -3 times -3, which is 9. So you can either adjust your scaling, or you could count up, it'd be 3 spots beyond what the grid is. Remember, you can use your A value to confirm that your graph is at least looking the appropriate way. We have a negative in front of this, so our A value is negative, means our graph should be facing downward. And it's like a -1 in front there, so that means that our graph is not really wide but not really narrow. Kind of a medium. Questions?
Wouldn't, negative, or what's the equation? Is the equation the same? -b over 2a?
For step 2?
Yeah.
No, we're just taking the average of those two values from the first one. So we're adding them together and dividing by 2.
For every problem?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're taking the average of them. This one looks different. It only has one set of parentheses, so it kind of looks like yesterday. But yesterday our parentheses had a squared on them, and this one doesn't have a squared on it. So that's not like yesterday. This is actually intercept form, but it looks a little bit different. How could I write this so that it looks the same as the other ones that we've had with 2 sets of parentheses and just a number in the front?
You can do
2x plus 0.
That first x is like an x plus 0 because it's just an x. So then what are my zeros or x-intercepts? 0 and 4. Okay, so if you just have a lonely x hanging outside of your parentheses, that's like an x plus 0. Then I want to find what's exactly halfway between 0 and 4. So I can take the average of 0 and 4, which is 2. Or again, you might be able to just eyeball it on a lot of them, but some of them will turn out to be decimals. And then we have to figure out where along that line to put the vertex, so we need to know how high it belongs. So I plug that x answer that I got into the original equation. And that gives me -8. And we can use our A value to confirm that this thing looks the way it's supposed to look. It's a +2, so it should be facing upward. And it's a 2, so it should maybe be a little bit more narrow than the last one that we looked at. Your homework's from 5.1. Once again, you don't need to label anything, just like the other nights. And then notice number 54 there at the end that you do have a word problem again tonight. So make sure that you notice that word problem there.